Good morning. Welcome. Glad you could make it today. We are blessed to have Jody May with us today from Exodus World Service. And if you recall, Exodus World Service is an organization that focuses on resettling refugees from around the world here in Chicago. And we, as you remember, last spring did a collection of household items to support a family from Afghanistan. And so they are up and going with a lot of the materials that we got them started with. That's what Exodus does. We're going to hear more about Exodus, as well as get a little taste of what it might be like to be a refugee. We're going to go through a little simulation that Jody will run us through to give you a sense of what the refugee experience is, and just a very, very small sliver of what that experience could be, because as I'm sure we'll talk about, the things that they go through as they're trying to get here or get anywhere out of whatever they're fleeing is really dramatic. So let's open up in a quick word of prayer, if we would, and then I'll let Jody take over. All right. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this church and this community. We ask your blessing on Jody as she speaks to us today. And we ask that you help us gain just a bit of an understanding of the refugee plight of so many around the world, and that we remember them and do what we can to support their efforts to lead a life that will be pleasing to you, and lead a life that is safe and appropriate for their kids. And we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Right.
Oh, Jody, turn it over to you.
Thank you. Could you remind me what time you need to be done?
10 o'clock.
Okay, that's what I thought. Perfect.
Tim Gamble has a question, I believe.
All right.
Raised his hand.
So sorry. Tim Gamble is getting used to Google Meet, and I was just going through the menu. I'm really looking forward to this. Good morning and thank you.
Tim Gamble just wants to make sure y'all know he's here.
Morning.
Love it. We were talking about Google Meets after having using Zoom, and I described it to being in the same place, same room, but just everything's upside down. Everything feels similar and the same, not quite the same. So kudos to you for trying something new, and good luck with it. Hopefully it'll work. So like you heard, my name is Jody, and I got to meet some of you virtually last year, was it? And I'm so wonderful to be here in person and see your beautiful, beautiful church. We were just talking about how if I like how this looks, I'm going to really love your sanctuary. So I'm looking forward to that. Come on in. Welcome. And so Exodus has a mission to mobilize the Christian community to welcome and befriend refugees. And so we work alongside resettlement agencies that welcome refugees to the Chicagoland area. And they have a contract with the federal government where they work to make for sure that they have their basic needs taken care of and intensive case management for the first 3 months that they are here. And then after that, they become pretty self-sufficient. And so Exodus mobilizes volunteers to walk alongside refugees during that process. And one of those things is Welcome to America Packs, which you guys participated in, and setting up an apartment for refugees. So today what we're going to do is we are going to go through what we call a pen and paper simulation. So those of you that are with us virtually, if you could grab a piece of paper and something to write with, that would be fantastic. You guys here, I have pens and paper. So I'm going to pass these out. Actually, paper's in here, so if you want to just pull out a piece of paper. And I'll give everybody a pen as well. Stuck in there. There you go. You're welcome. Okay, perfect. Perfect.
Okay.
Excellent.
And I'll do this.
And you're not going to write a ton on there. So if you need something to write on, I can bring you a hymnal or a Bible to write on. Looks like I'm only seeing Bible. So if someone wants a hard surface, I can bring this with us.
That pen is funny. Thank you. Thank you.
Right on. Okay, I need something right on underneath. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm fine. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else, Ava? Perfect. All right. And actually, to fit the size that you're on, you can fold it in half. That'll just work easier because you don't need the full sheet of paper anyway, so that'll just make it simpler for you. Perfect. Actually, I was just gonna say, you want to hold that over there?
Some of yourselves together.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Oops. My slides are over here, so I'm gonna need to move over here. All right. So what we're doing today is what we call our Fleeing for Your Life simulation. And in this, I want you to imagine yourself not sitting here, not sitting with the rest of us here. I want you to imagine yourself in your home. I want you to imagine and visualize what a refugee's journey might be like. This is an exercise in empathy to help us understand what a refugee's journey might be like. So I want you to use your imagination and try to really immerse yourself in the experience. What types of things would you see? What would you hear? What would you have to leave behind to flee, to find safety for yourself and your family? You are about to become a refugee. You have just a couple of minutes to prepare for a journey to an unknown destination. The only thing you know for sure is that you will likely never return to this home that you live in now. You've been told that there are trucks that will be arriving shortly to take you and your family out of this town and out of danger. And it'll take you to the coast where hopefully there are boats that can take you and your family to a safe place. So your immediate task is to pack a bag for the journey. In the bag, you can carry up to 10 items. The items must be things that you're capable of carrying and can fit inside of a bag. So if you have a motorcycle, you can't stick it in the bag, all right? So it has to be able to fit and something you're capable of carrying. Your paper is your backpack. I'd like you to number it 1 through 10. And on that paper, write down the 10 items that you would pack if you were to flee today. If you're having a hard time coming up with 10 items, something that's helpful would be to think of yourself in your home. Even close your eyes if you need to. And imagine if your home were suddenly filling with smoke and you needed to leave. Sometimes it's hard for us to imagine a journey as distant from us as having to flee because it's dangerous. So if you can think of what it would be like if suddenly you smelled smoke and smoke was coming into your home, what would you grab from your space? Closing your eyes helps you visualize those things. So what would you grab as you evacuated your home? Give you a couple more minutes. Okay. What kind of things do you need to survive that would be helpful to have on the journey? What kind of things are sentimental that would be heartbreaking to leave behind and know that you would never see again? Think about those types of things as you finish up your list. I'll give you about another minute to finish it up. As you're writing down your last few items, you're being allowed to think about this while sitting in complete silence. Even those of you that are virtual, I'm sure it's fairly quiet at your homes. Imagine what it would be like if you were having to pack while the other members of your family were also trying to pack items. We're sitting in one spot, just simply making a list. Imagine if you had to go find those items while other people are also grabbing their items. There's a level of anxiety involved. You're hearing strange noises outside, maybe larger vehicles that you're not familiar with, maybe some yelling, sounds that are not familiar to you in your neighborhood. And maybe not everyone's home. Maybe one of your family members is at school or at work. And this urgency came about that you had to leave right now. And so at the same time, you're trying to get through to your family member saying, there's a transport vehicle coming now. You've got to get home. Imagine trying to make a list in the midst of that anxiety and that chaos of having to leave quickly. The truck has arrived early. That will take you and your neighbors to the coast. Nothing more can be added to your bag. You board the truck. As you step into the truck, you look back at your home. I want you to picture your home, taking a last look at the home where you find safety and security, knowing that it might be your last time to see it. The truck is very crowded and we're all squeezed into the back of it. The driver takes off and we are on our way. You take that one last glimpse back at the home that you are leaving behind. Driver is not being too careful and the road is really rough. He almost loses control around a curve. You managed to save your bag, but you did not zip it up all the way. And the last item, I forgot to change the slide. The last item that you packed falls out of your bag. So I would like you to cross off the last item that you packed. If you packed 10 items, it'll be number 10. If you didn't quite get to 10 items, cross out whatever the last item that you packed was. We yell for the driver to slow down and stop so we can retrieve what we left behind, but he ignores our cries for him to stop, and we watch as that item fades into the distance behind us. As we leave the city, the truck is going more slowly, and you're able to relax a bit and evaluate your surroundings and think about what lies ahead. Your thoughts are interrupted by a strange sound coming from the engine. You finally realize that this truck doesn't look as great as you had hoped it might look. That noise grows louder and louder until finally the truck rolls to a stop. The driver gets out, opens up the hood, looks inside. Maybe some of you are good at fixing cars, and so several people get out, tinker around with it. But no matter what they do, it won't restart. We don't have the right tool to fix it. Bless you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the driver announces that everyone will have to get out and walk. Despite our pleas, the driver refuses to give us refunds for the money that we paid him to take us all the way to the coast, and we are not even halfway there. Our only option is to get out and walk. So we continue our journey on foot. As we're walking, feet are tired, backs are tired. You know how kids are on a trip. Are we almost there yet? I'm tired, right? We hadn't planned to walk, and yet here we are. And so we realized that this bag that we packed is too heavy. So in order to continue on, you're going to need to reduce the weight of your bag by crossing off the heaviest item you packed. However, if the heaviest item is something that you desperately want to keep, you may cross off any number of other items that make up approximately the same weight. So cross off your heaviest item or a combination of items that weigh similarly. Give you a second to do that. I want you to picture that item that you just removed from your backpack on the ground as we walk away from it. Oh, no. Picture it being left behind there. It's hard, isn't it? It's really hard. So we continue on, and at last we reach the coast. There are boats on the wharf, but we find out that we must bribe the harbor master in order to even be allowed to board one of the boats. We have to bribe him by handing over our most expensive item that we packed. Cross off your most expensive item that you have left on your list. Thankfully, the harbor master has accepted your bribe and you board the boat. These boats are much smaller than what you had expected and what we had been told would be waiting here. Instead of a large boat, it's an inflatable raft. There's other boats there that are rickety wooden boats that don't even look like they could float. But yet we have no option. To go back is dangerous. To go forward is holding on to hope that we'll reach safety. So we board the boat, even though it's overcrowded, and we struggle to even find a place to sit. The boat has been oversold because more people means more money, and that's way more important to the harbor master than your safety is. The captain of the boat starts yelling at us and tells us that the boat is too heavy. That's not even our fault. It's the harbor master who loaded the boat up. But he tells us that if we do not reduce the weight in the boat, he's going to make us get off of the boat with no refund of that bribe that we just paid. So each of us must throw overboard the heaviest item that we have left in our bag. Cross out your heaviest item. With our items thrown overboard, the captain determines that we can set sail. Conditions on the boat are crowded, as I said, and the motion of the waves is making people get seasick. People are starting to throw up. Imagine that in a tightly crowded boat. If people are getting sick, the waves begin to increase in intensity, and your fear rises as you wonder how much of this boat can handle. I keep forgetting to hit my slides. As you wonder how much of this that the boat can handle. The waves start crashing on us. And suddenly a huge wave sweeps over the boat and nearly tips it. We're able to grab onto our bag and save our bag, but anything that you packed that can be destroyed by water needs to be crossed off of your list. Books, technology, photos, all must be crossed off unless you packed Ziploc bags. I know that sounds crazy, but our refugee friends have shared with us that those who have gone before them have communicated back some important helps that make their journey a little bit better. And so if you pack Ziploc bags, you may save everything in your bag, but otherwise books, technology, photos, all of those must be crossed off. If you packed travel documents, those you may keep because they are thin. And our refugee friends have showed us what some of theirs look like after making the journey. And they've been through everything, but they were able to hold on to them. You are wet, cold, and hungry. You're crowded in the boat with all these people. There are children crying. You've lost track of how many sunrises and sunsets there have even been since you set out on this water. In the distance, someone spots a ship. They see it in the distance. And we've heard about humanitarian ships that sail these waters that can help people like us make it to safety. So we wave our arms to get their attention, and our hope rises as that boat draws closer. But when it gets close enough, we realize that this is not a friendly ship. This is a ship of pirates. Now, I know when we think of pirates from our North American perspective, we think of a patch and a peg leg, and they go, "Arg, matey." That is not the type of pirate I'm talking about. I'm talking about pirates that exist in 2022 that travel these known routes of refugees, knowing that you packed your valuables and that you are desperate to find your way to safety. They know that you will do just about anything because you have nowhere to go. You're in the middle of this body of water with nowhere to go. They tell us that if we don't produce our valuables, that they'll kill us. They threaten to take our children. And so they demand that each one of us give over our most valuable item. So whatever the most valuable item you have left is, cross it off. Now, I do realize that as you're looking at your list and what you have left, you probably don't have much of value left on there. So I want you to just think a moment of what the consequences would be if you handed what you just crossed off, if you handed that to a pirate to beg for your life or for your safety. For some of you, it would be the end of the journey. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to say that the pirates have accepted what you offered them and they leave us and we're able to sail on. With them accepting our valuables, we feel violated and dehumanized. The other things that we encountered seemed like things that maybe could have been expected, but this felt different. Because we were specifically targeted here. Our humanity was stolen from us. Your thoughts are interrupted by a cry from someone near the front of the boat who claims to see land. You crane your neck around to see if they're correct. And finally, you see it as well. Your thoughts are flooded with relief as we pull into harbor. Many have arrived at this harbor before us. We disembark with whatever we have left in our bag. You are in a safe country now. You have your feet finally on ground instead of on water. Perhaps life will be better from now on. But remember, you have no income. You have no roof over your head. You don't speak the language of the people around you. And all you have to start your new life is what you have left in your bag. So let's take a moment, just reflect on that. Going to have a conversation about this. As you think about landing on this shore with what you have on your list in your bag, what are you feeling? Bless you. What are you feeling about your next steps, about your prospects? Might just be one word that you want to share, it might be more. Just want to open it up for you to tell me what you're feeling right now. Yes.
A lot of anxiety
A lot of anxiety. Why are you feeling anxiety?
because I have nothing to start off with. I only have my family and the one thing I have left,
What do you have left?
a blanket.
A blanket. So you've got your family and a blanket. Do you feel very hopeful about success with just a blanket?
No,
No, but you do have your family. So that's a good start, right? Yeah, but a lot of anxiety.
Depression,
Depression. Tell me why you're feeling depression.
because maybe you don't have anything left in your bag either. Maybe just a small amount of money or something
Exactly.
to start a new life.
Yes,
That's not much.
exactly. And you left home because it was dangerous in hopes that there'd be something better. But to land here with so much taken away from you, that hope that's deferred, I think would lead towards depression, wouldn't it? Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Anybody else? What are you feeling?
Urgency.
Urgency. Tell me about urgency.
Well, I think if you're landing in the circumstances you just described, first thing top of mind is shelter.
Yeah.
Shelter and food and water.
Yeah.
What
Do you have anything that would work for that left on your list?
Yeah,
Yeah? You have some tools that'll help you?
food and some water.
Okay, excellent. So you've got enough that you're feeling the urgency because that's going to run out,
Sure.
right? But you know that you've got to replace it soon.
Right.
Yeah. I think that sense of urgency. And imagine now that urgency colliding with anxiety and depression, right? Anxiety and depression tends to freeze us. But yet there's this urgency that makes us need to move forward and to find a solution, to find those necessities that we'll need to be able to move forward. Yes.
Suppressed anger.
Suppressed anger. I love it. Tell me about it.
Well, I think you've got to be really angry. I mean, you've lost everything. If you had saved any money, that went with the pirates. If you'd saved any photos, those disappeared.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be really angry, but you know that anger isn't going to help you at this moment. And so you're pushing it all inside. And I can imagine that comes out later in bursts of, at inappropriate moments over something very small. Because you kept it down for so long.
I love that reflection that you're not only seeing the anger, you've lost a lot. You lost a lot on the journey, but you lost even more when I had you pack. Because when you only packed 10 items, think of all that was taken away from you when I said pack 10 items. That was your biggest loss. You lost your home, you lost your country, you lost your neighbors, you lost everything that's familiar to you, plus all the other tangible items that weren't included in that 10. And then all the other losses. Yes, I think anger, absolutely. But that addition that you added of that suppressed anger, I think that's really insightful because you have to move forward. There's that urgency. And so we've got to keep moving, and anger is going to stop us, right? And then I love your reflection too, that that's going to pop up in places later where people might be like, why are they angry? This is really not that. Look at all they went through, but yet we've got some anger here. Why are they angry about this little minor thing? It's all that suppressed anger that's built up. Anyone else?
Confusion.
Confusion. What are you feeling confused about?
Like where am I? What are the rules here? What are the real rules here? Where do I go next?
Exactly. So many questions. Yes, I'm here. Oh, I'm on safe ground. I made it through that. But where am I? What do I need to do here? What are the rules? Yeah, all of that. What are my next steps? Yeah, definitely confusion. Are you going to say something?
I would say I would feel lost.
Lost. Yeah. Just not even knowing where to go, right? Yeah.
What's the language?
What's the language? Do we even speak the language? Do we have the capacity to learn some words? Could we find someone that could maybe help us?
Well, are these locations, these folks land? I mean, are there people on the receiving end to receive them? Or are they just showing up and wandering into town or wandering into the countryside and camping or whatever? Is there someone there to help them? I think that's true in some cases. I think it's not true in other cases.
Exactly.
But
Exactly. That's a great question because depending on where the conflict is that refugees are fleeing from, they may or may not have humanitarian supports where they're landing at, especially if a conflict has just recently happened or as routes start to become more and more dangerous. Refugees may try to find different routes, different ways to get themselves to safety. And so until those routes are known, there isn't that humanitarian support on the other end. Yes.
What would make a route more dangerous? More pirates?
Yeah. Yeah. If the route that we just took, if you were communicating to family members back home after what we encountered, you might suggest that they take a different route, right? You would share what we have encountered and maybe talk to others, find out if there's a way that would be more safe for the people that you love who are coming behind you. Yeah. Yeah. So what would your next steps be? What would you do? You've landed in this new country. What kind of ideas do you have as to what next steps would be?
First priorities are food, water, and shelter.
Food, water, and shelter. Where are you going to find that?
You'd look for maybe a church,
I love that you thought of that.
government building. I
Yeah.
don't know.
A church, a government building, absolutely. Somewhere where from your experience, you know that there may be people who can help there. And I love that church is identified by that because around the world, churches are meeting that challenge of meeting refugees as they are seeking safety on that journey. We partner with an organization in Lebanon. We send teams there to help support the work that they're doing. And the stories of how the church in Lebanon has risen up to help these people who are fleeing from Syria into Lebanon, to help them is just amazing. Amazing to see the role of the church there. So I'm glad you identified that. How many of you have travel documents or identification? How many of you have that? Wow. Everybody except for you. But guess what? I feel you. Because you know what? When I did this the first time, because I started out at Exodus as a volunteer. When I did a simulation that was very similar to this, I did not even think about packing my travel documents at all. They asked that question at the end and I was like, oh, yeah. So you and I, we'd be undocumented. That means we can't even prove who we are. So as a family, I'm assuming you two are family. As a family, you're going to have decisions to make. You have your documentation, but you don't have documentation for your child. So do you leave him behind with someone who can help them wait for that. You move on with the rest of your family. Right? There are those types of decisions. There are those types of decisions that are very difficult for a family, where a family, one parent may decide to stay back, one parent may go on, could be because there's a medical issue, maybe, an ankle was broken in the process. And so they need to heal before they can move on. So a family will separate because of that. You could have been actually separated on the journey and trying to get to safety and hoping that you can meet up when you reach that place of safety. So let's go back to the beginning. When you were making your list, what were some of your thoughts about deciding those 10 items? What were some of your priorities in what you packed? Yes.
Things that were sentimental to me, like my journal or like a memory box.
Yes. Things that were sentimental. I think that's really important because those are a part of our history. It's a part of what's deep in our heart, right? And so to be able to bring those things with, it's just devastating to think of not having those things with. Can I ask you how you felt when those things had to be crossed off your list?
It was kind of like heartbreaking because it's just like, it's all of my past life and what had happened to me.
Yeah.
And now it's just gone. So it's just kind of like my childhood, because when you're a refugee, you have to kind of grow up.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like my childhood just disappeared.
Wow, I just got goosebumps as you said that. But I think it very beautifully said. I think that's so true. Refugee children do have to grow up faster. And they lose that part of them, that childhood. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. What other things were you thinking about when you packed your list, packed your bag?
I was trying to be much more practical
Okay,
along the lines of travel documents,
yes,
phone, stuff for my, travel documents for my kids.
Yeah.
So I left the sentimental stuff to.
Did you have sentimental stuff? Yeah. Yeah.
Sentimental stuff.
What'd you say?
No sentimental stuff.
No sentimental stuff.
No.
All right.
I also was practical though, knowing that I'm always cold.
Okay, yeah.
I had a rain jacket with a hood. I brought a big shawl,
Yes.
blanket shawl that
Yeah.
could go either way, but that got crossed off somewhere along the line.
Yeah, yeah.
I did hang on to the rain jacket with the hood and a pair of gloves.
So that's what you have left?
That's what I have left.
So you would be warm, protected from the elements.
Gloves and my passport
Okay,
in wet,
yes. You'll dry out.
on wet passport.
Yeah.
I had a weapon until I got to the pirates.
Yeah.
Figured they outgunned me, so they probably wanted.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. So then as we started on the journey, here I'm Jody. I'm so friendly and ask you to make a list. And then you realize rather quickly, maybe I'm not so nice because it became obvious. It was no secret that I had you make the list so I could have you cross things off. How did it feel when that reality started to sink in? That I packed these items only so they could be taken away from me. What were some of the emotions that you felt? And I know here it's writing on a list, but I want us to kind of process and think through what that would feel like as a refugee when you realize what I packed is doing me no good. I'm losing things anyways. What kind of emotions were you feeling?
Anger.
Anger. What were you feeling angry about?
Well, you're packing a pretty small complement of things to begin with, and then to have them stripped away.
Yeah.
You're kind of down to the bare essentials.
Exactly. And yet even the bare essentials are getting more and more bare.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you're going to deal with, and the anger really starts to raise up when you start dealing with people that are taking advantage.
Yes.
Weapon wants to come out.
Yeah,
Deal with the truck driver, or deal with the harbor master, or deal with the
Exactly.
pirates.
exactly.
You have to be careful about your anger.
Yeah. So angry, but needing to keep it in check because you realize that it could make your situation worse. if you
And
have
everybody
time.
around.
And everyone around you. Good point. Good point. What else were you feeling?
When I first packed it, I was thinking, oh, I can leave all this stuff. I can leave it. I was like thinking, I'm pretty good. I can leave everything at home as long as I have these 10 things. But then it was just like disbelief, like, oh my gosh, like, I only have these 10 things and I can't believe I have to get rid of them too. So it was just like,
Yes.
just complete disbelief. Like, I cannot believe this is happening.
Yes, disbelief. That's a really good word for it. Because we have this hope, right? Like I have packed efficiently. I have what I need. I will be successful in this journey. And then just disbelief as you realize it's not going to get me there. I'm not going to have what I need for this trip. Thank you.
Just a sense of unfairness. I mean, it's not fair. I mean, life's not fair. I mean, clearly, but you said, I worked really hard. I was very practical about what I thought I was going to need. And if I have
Exactly.
these 10 things, I'll be okay.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden, just by happenstance, things get taken away. That's not fair. I worked too hard to figure it out. I had the right answer and it's no longer the right answer.
Absolutely. I would say that is what I feel personally the most as I do the simulation with people, as I meet refugees, because I still volunteer with Exodus as well. I feel just this overwhelming sense of unfairness, that on this big planet that I can be in my home with my comforts while someone else is fleeing and losing things. That's hard for my mind to balance the unfairness of that. It's just difficult. Yes.
I just keep thinking, we started with these 10, but, thinking about you've left behind all your furniture, any family heirlooms,
Yes.
any jewelry, any, silver, any, all those nice things that you may have, your sporting equipment, your, bicycles, and
Yeah.
all those things that you might have had.
Yeah.
And it must be really hard to end up in a country and you look around at everybody who has those things and you had it.
Yes.
And how long it'll be before you ever will have most of that again.
Yes.
And
Yes.
some of it you will not, you'll never have your family heirlooms or
They're gone.
any of that.
Yeah. I
And
love
also, if you had a career,
It's gone.
it doesn't do you any good.
Yep.
You can't speak the language.
Exactly. Certifications that you had in your home country are not accepted in other countries.
You're doing something with your
Yeah.
hands because that's what you can find.
Yes. I love that you identified that there are things that a refugee had that now they don't. Because I think sometimes from our American perspective, we tend to think of refugees as never having had that much to begin with. But refugees are people just like us. They come from all different walks of life. And so I have a refugee friend who is a doctor, who was a professor at the University of Kabul, teaching other doctors. And when he arrived here, his job was bagging groceries. And my sense of fairness and justice at that this man who is so intelligent has helped so many people that he's bagging groceries. And the people that are receiving those groceries have no idea of this man and who he is. It's hard. It's really hard to think of that. But I love that you identified that because we need to change our perspective and realize that refugees come from all different walks of life. Yes, sir.
I just have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we couldn't probably pack like a gallon of water
Mm-hmm.
and food. So how exactly did we make the voyage? If the pilot, the boat person,
Yeah.
was like so rude, we got a tiny raft for a ton of people.
Yes.
We need a ton of food, a ton of water. Who brought that and where did it come from is my question.
So many refugees do pack as much of that as they can. And the sad reality is that there are many that do not make the entire journey. And so there are those that are lost along the way, which is a sad reality. But many times it's items that they've packed to be able to go on that journey. And an important thing to remember is that not every refugee's journey looks like what I just described. The most obvious way would be that not every refugee crosses a body of water, right? A lot of them do, but many of them do not. And so it's going to look different. I have a couple of suggested books, if you're interested. One in particular that mirrors this simulation is called A Hope More Powerful Than the Sea, and it's written by Melissa Fleming. She tells the story of a young woman named Doa Elzamo, who she met when she arrived from crossing the Mediterranean. And she tells her story in this book. And her story is from fleeing Syria, and she encounters nearly every one of the items or events that we just covered in this simulation, only hers involved even worse circumstances. She was arrested. She was separated from the people she was traveling with. And when the pirates didn't get what they wanted, their boat was attacked, rammed by this larger boat, and it was sunk. And she's one of the few survivors of the biggest refugee boat sinking in the Mediterranean. And so her story is just an amazing story of survival and resiliency. I have another book that I want to recommend because we have our what's your name?
Jess.
Jazz. Nice to meet you. There's a book called Refugee, and it's by Alan Gratz. Have you read it?
Yeah, it's so good.
It is so good. It is so good. I recommend it to adults as well. So it's called Refugee, and it's by Alan Gratz, and it tells the story of 3 refugees at different time periods making a water crossing. And so their stories parallel. It is a fiction story, but Alan Gratz did a lot of research on the history of these crossings. So he merged some stories together to create that book, but it's a great story.
How do you spell the last name?
Gratz. All right. So then I want to tell you just a little bit about the ways that Exodus is connecting with refugees when they arrive here. So when a refugee finishes that simulation that we just talked about then, but for them it's real life, when we reach that shore, a refugee needs to find their way to a United Nations location where they can be relatively safe there. So that's where they're processed. That's where the vetting begins. And so a refugee spends a minimum of 2 to 3 years going through the vetting process. There are 27.1 million refugees in the world today. And of those refugees, less than 1% are resettled annually. So because of that, the average amount of time that a person is displaced is 17 years, because there are literally refugees who are living out their entire life still waiting in a refugee camp without being resettled. And so after they have been in the refugee camp, they receive an invitation from a third country to come and resettle there. In our case, it's the United States. The United States invites them to come here because all of that vetting was done in the refugee camp. The refugee is legal the moment that they arrive here. They're matched with a resettlement agency that provides intensive case management for 3 months, and our volunteers provide packs. You know about the Welcome to America pack already because you did that. You set up the apartment to be able to welcome that family in. That was the first way that I connected with Exodus as well, by doing a welcome pack with my family and a couple other families, actually. Then we also have an ethnic grocery care pack. Ethnic grocery care pack are groceries that are familiar to the country that a refugee is coming from. Another book is called, what is the name of the book? How Dare the Sun Rise? And it's written by Sandra, I don't know how to spell her last name, but it's Owiringimana. And she resettled in Rochester, New York. And when their family looked in the refrigerator, they saw a tray with a pile of worms on it wrapped in plastic. And they were disgusted that Americans would eat worms. How could they do this? It was ground beef. Think about what ground beef looks like. All right. So groceries that are familiar to us are groceries that we can prepare. And it also makes it feel like home, right? So that's our ethnic grocery care packs. And then baby care packs are all the items that you would think about being at a baby shower. So it's for an expectant or a new mom. Those items are collected and then that mom is blessed with those items. All of them are delivered by volunteers that can help the family feel welcome. And then here's a couple pictures of those packs being delivered. And then we have new neighbor programs. All of our new neighbor programs are volunteers committing to visit a refugee family once a week for 3 months. And so it's a relational meeting that's coming together. So New Neighbor is for refugees who have just recently arrived. It's very open-ended. It's helping them navigate the ins and outs of learning their new life here in the United States. New Neighbor for Youth is our mentorship program. You're matched with a refugee youth, and you're helping them academically, helping answer questions about life in the United States. And you're also supporting the parents as they are helping their child navigate academics here in the United States. New Neighbor Conversations is practicing conversational English. The refugees have ESL classes through their resettlement agency, but they need to practice. And so it's being intentional with conversational English. And then New Neighbor Citizenship. After a refugee has been in the US for 5 years, they can apply to become a US citizen. And so these volunteers meet with them once a week for 3 months to practice and prepare for that citizenship exam. Often they're able to go with them for their swearing in ceremony and be a part of that momentous occasion with them. So those are our New Neighbor programs. Couple pictures, just because I love pictures. All right. So thank you for having me come in. I'll open it up to questions if anybody has any questions before we need to wrap up. Yes.
How do those new neighbor programs work if you decide, okay, I'd like to do that? Do you go physically to meet these people? You know, how's it set up? How are you introduced? How does that work?
All of the programs are in person. You have a 3-hour training that you need to do, and generally with me. We do have others that facilitate as well. If there's a group that wanted to, I could come back out to the church here and train people, or we have it virtually as well as an option. But you are being matched with a family and you travel to their home to be able to work with them. We do have a program in DuPage County, our New Neighbor for Youth, that can be done virtually. So over Zoom, connecting and mentoring the child, helping them with their homework over Zoom. So that's our only virtual option is the New Neighbor for Youth. Yes.
So Jody, I think you touched on this last time you did the virtual thing for us, but could you, just for the group here, distinguish between refugees and the migrants that we're seeing coming across the border?
All right. So refugees, what we're talking about, asylum seekers or asylees, look and are very similar. Their journey is incredibly similar. The difference is in the process that they go through. So I'm going to condense it really, really tight, and I'm going to neglect the fact that this is an incredibly long and difficult journey. So remember that I'm really boiling it down. Refugees in their home country, they flee to a UN refugee camp, so a second country. And then they flee from that, not flee, they're invited from that second country into a third country. So home country, refugee camp, resettlement country for us, the US, right? For an asylum seeker, they flee their home country for many of the same reasons that a refugee does. But that middle part of the UN refugee camp doesn't exist in their journey. They have crossed over many different borders and they land in a country like the US. And we're in the borders of that country and they're requesting permission to stay. So they have not been vetted yet and they have not been approved for resettlement. So it is legal to request asylum, no matter how they've come into the US, whether it's on a student visa, whether it's without a visa, whether they cross over the border. Any of those ways, they can present themselves to a border agent and request asylum. That is legal, but then they have to wait for their court date. And at their court date, they have to prove that it is unsafe for themselves to return. If they're granted asylum, then they can stay. If they are not granted asylum, they must leave. So that process, once they arrive in the US, is so completely different because they are doing what was done in the refugee camp. They're doing it here in the US.
Are there any UN resettlement camps for anyone coming from South and Central America toward the US?
That is the biggest issue is there is not a large UN presence in South America. And so because of that, for many of them, their only option is to flee the violence that's happening in their country and make their way to a country where it will be safe.
There's
So
no UN camp to go to.
there is not. There is a UN presence in a couple different places where they can register. So we have had a few that came in as refugees from Guatemala, Honduras. We've had a couple even just recently from those places, but it is very few. Yes.
So one other process, it seems to me, is with a lot of the more recent Afghan refugees did not spend years in a
Yes.
refugee camp. So that seems like there's another way that
There is.
things happen.
So in the past year, the US had a very unique response to two situations. The fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban and the invasion of Ukraine. The US determined that we would have a different response to both of those. And so for Afghanistan, the response was because of our involvement in what happened there, we had a responsibility to those individuals who had helped our troops there. And so for them, their process looked completely different. Instead of going to a refugee camp, they were brought to bases around the world of ourselves and our allies. The beginning of their vetting happened there. Then they were brought to bases here in the United States where their vetting was finished while they were there. If they helped our troops, there is a process called a visa called a special immigration visa that they are granted that falls under refugee resettlement. If they did not qualify for a special immigration visa, meaning it was unsafe for them to return back, but they had not been one of the people who helped our troops, they were granted what is called humanitarian parole. Parole not having anything to do with prison, being released, none of that, meaning being released into the United States for humanitarian reasons because they were unable to go home. So that was the unique response to what happened there. So much quicker. So in months instead of years was the process for Afghan refugees. And for Ukraine, because of our commitment to allies who were receiving Ukrainian refugees, our government decided that the response would be different to that as well than from other countries. And so an expedited process and granting of humanitarian parole was also made available for Ukrainians. We were excited to see that the US government was willing to think creatively and find new pathways. But our hearts were also sad because many refugees who were waiting for years and years, their travel to the US was delayed because this took priority. So we are hopeful and we are praying that as these situations are now a little bit in the rearview mirror, still happening, still ongoing, but we are hopeful that we will see the increase in refugee resettlement alongside responses to conflicts that we know are going to happen anyways. So we're hopeful, and that is my prayer, because it was a hard year to see good happening, but at the same time, others who are having to wait longer. Yes.
Why does it take, on average 17 years to be able to live in a refugee camp? And what is that like? Is that is it develop its own community at the refugee camp? Do they have school there?
They do develop their own community there. There is limited access to education and medical care. Most of that is done by humanitarian organizations that come in and are able to help there. Like, for instance, Exodus and our partners in Lebanon sponsor classrooms inside of the refugee camps. So it is very limited, but people with skills rise up and form this community. Even forms of currency that develop inside of refugee camps. Yeah, and why is it? It's because there's 27.1 million refugees and not enough countries that are welcoming numbers that can make that wait time shorter. Yeah.
I was going to ask about those other countries. You said there's 27.1 million refugees in
Yes.
the world, and only 1%, did you say, get
Yes.
resettled?
It's not that they can be resettled. We could resettle as many as countries want to, but with the numbers that are being resettled, it's less than 1%.
So how does the US rank in terms of a place, that's accepting refugees? Are we really way down on the list? Are we at the top of the list? I have no idea.
I don't like that question. I used to be able to answer that we were number one. We are no longer number one. Canada surpassed us because our numbers have gone down dramatically. And this year, end of September is the end of the fiscal year for refugee resettlement. And we're on target to resettle the lowest number of refugees in our resettlement history this year. Even though Biden's administration raised it to the refugee ceiling, which is the number that we're allowed to allow in every year. He raised it to 125,000. We're only around 12 to 13,000 that were admitted. That does come with the fact that the Ukrainian and Afghan refugees are not counted in that number because they didn't come in through the UN process. So actual total numbers, if those were all counted, it would be a little bit higher, but yeah, we are no longer the leader in refugee resettlement.
We have room for a approved capacity for 125.
Yes,
We took 13.
yes. I don't know the final numbers yet, but it's low.
And if you add in the UK, Ukraine, then what would it be, like 40 maybe?
I'm not for sure, actually. I don't know.
But it's not at 120.
It's not 125, no. But all resettlement was put on pause in the response to the Afghan crisis. So all of it's nuanced, and that would be one of the major
Is that just an
factors.
agency capacity issue that we don't have enough people in the immigration service to help with these transitions into the country?
125 is a pretty standard number of where we've been at, right around 100,000 or above. And the previous administration dropped that number significantly. And then COVID also hit. And so a lot of the infrastructure that exists to help process refugees, a lot of that is being rebuilt. So it's a time of rebuilding for resettlement